Hey guys, tonight we slip gently back into golden sunlight, echoing marble halls, and the faint perfume of lotus oil rising in the air. You're lying on a silk-covered couch, somewhere in Cleopatra's palace, and a servant is quietly adjusting the linen draped over your shoulder. Outside, the city of Alexandria stirs, its marketplaces still hushed, its library sleeping under the weight of unwritten scrolls, and its queen. Well, she's about to start her skincare routine, which includes at least one large vat of donkey milk and a level of commitment that would terrify even your most obsessive modern influencer. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stretch, rising from your lavish sleeping couch with all the grace of someone who's not entirely sure whether they're a diplomat or just a well-dressed houseplant. The air smells faintly of rosewater, sandalwood, and something sweet you can't quite place, maybe honey, maybe some floral resin imported from a place you've never even heard of. That's kind of how it works in Cleopatra's Alexandria. Everything's a mixture of luxury and mystery. The ceiling above you is painted with stars, gold leaf pressed into indigo plaster, and below your bare feet, the cool tile floor whispers softly with your every step. The duck mosaic by the corner nods at you approvingly. You nod back. It's going to be that kind of day. A servant appears from behind a curtain. Silent, practiced, holding a folded linen cloth and a shallow dish of something warm and creamy. She bows. You bow back, slightly unsure whether this means good morning or prepare to exfoliate. You follow her through the painted halls, passing statues of gods, cats, and people who look suspiciously well moisturized for having lived 2,000 years ago. The queen hasn't summoned you yet. But you've been given the guest regimen, which sounds relaxing until you realize it's a full-time job with at least 12 steps and one ingredient that definitely used to be alive. As you walk, the sun begins to filter through open colonnades, spilling across gardens bursting with papyrus, jasmine, and the occasional confused ibis. Alexandria, founded by Alexander but made unforgettable by Cleopatra, is a city stitched together with sea breeze and scrolls. And somewhere beneath it all, hidden behind chambers and courtyards, lies the royal bath. The doors to the bathing complex open with the groan of ancient cedar, revealing a room the size of a small temple. There are columns. There are braziers. There are gold-handled combs and shell-shaped soap dishes. And at the center, steaming gently under a shaft of morning light, is a tub large enough to accommodate your skepticism. It's full of milk. Specifically, donkey milk. You blink. A eunuch in teal robes nods solemnly and gestures for you to approach. A papyrus tablet nearby confirms the math. Cleopatra's private skincare required the milk of approximately 700 donkeys per bath, give or take a particularly lazy morning. That's right, donkeys. Because apparently camel milk was too rich, goat milk too oily, and cow milk just so ordinary. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra actually bathed in donkey milk daily or whether it was simply a kind of royal rumor, perhaps started by someone who wanted to justify an enormous dairy bill. But multiple sources, Roman, Greek, and even Egyptian, mention the habit, and you're standing here now, facing a tub that smells like yogurt and rose petals, so it feels pretty confirmed. You dip a toe in. It's warm. Creamy. Luxurious in that weird way where your brain is both amazed and deeply unsure whether this is skincare or dessert. A servant hands you a cloth soaked in almond oil and frankincense resin, and as you sink into the milk bath, yes, all the way, you realize that Cleopatra didn't just bathe. She curated an experience. The bath is only step one. As you soak, musicians somewhere behind a gauze curtain begin playing a sleepy tune on harp and pan flute. Your skin starts to soften. Or dissolve. Hard to say. The donkey milk rich in lactic acid is apparently excellent for sloughing off dead skin cells. You try not to think about what else might be sloughing off. Floating beside you is a polished copper mirror, resting on a lotus-shaped float. You catch your reflection, milk-glazed and blinking, and realize you're now part of a ritual that once defined divine beauty. Cleopatra wasn't just Queen of Egypt, she was its embodiment. And the body required maintenance. The scent of honey drifts across the room as a servant steps closer with a dish of exfoliating paste. You know what's coming next, and your skin isn't ready. But history waits for no one. And neither does Cleopatra's skincare team. You sit perfectly still as a servant begins applying the honey-based exfoliant to your arms in slow, practiced strokes. The mixture is gritty sea salt, maybe, or ground lotus seed, and smells like something halfway between dessert and medicine. As the paste warms against your skin, you start to understand something fundamental. Cleopatra's glow wasn't just good lighting. It was full-time labor. The servant adds a second blend to your shoulders, something sharp and resinous, likely myrrh mixed with powdered rosehips. The sensation is both bracing and deeply relaxing, like a polite punch from nature. From the corner, another servant begins fanning smoke from a burning incense cone, Apopanax, perhaps, or benzoin. Swirling in the golden light like visible music. Behind a partition, you hear a voice. Not commanding, exactly, more amused. He smells like almond bread, the queen says. You freeze. The curtain parts just slightly, and there she is, Cleopatra VII, Philopator, monarch, mother, strategist, seductress, and at this particular moment wrapped in a linen robe, hair bound in a net of gold wire and pearls, watching you with a look that says she's judging your pores. You bow. Or curtsy. It's unclear what your body is doing. The duck beside you tries to mimic the gesture and ends up slipping into the milk bath with an indignant splash. Cleopatra laughs. It's a low, rippling sound, like silk being drawn through fingers. She steps forward, barefoot on tiles painted with blue lotuses, and gestures to a second bath. Join me? You hesitate, already slippery with oil and ambiguity, but what else can you do? You nod and climb out, toweling off with a cloth that smells of cedar and fig sap. Another servant helps you into a fresh wrap, while the duck is lifted out of the tub and thoroughly toweled by a junior attendant who looks like he regrets every career decision that led him here. Cleopatra settles into her own bath like a cat claiming a throne. The milk steams gently around her, catching in the pearl-dotted ends of her hair. She sighs and reaches for a slice of candied ginger, which she offers to you. Do you know why I do this? She asks, gesturing to the bath, the perfumes, the army of linen-draped staff. You take the ginger. To stay young? She smiles. To stay memorable. It's a better answer than you were expecting. Outside the palace, Alexandria continues its daily hum, scribes hurrying to the library, fishmongers shouting in the agora, mathematicians arguing under porticos. But in here, the world shrinks to the size of a tiled chamber scented with flowers and ambition. You drift a little. Your body sinks deeper into the water, the milk clinging to your skin like second thoughts. The duck, perched now on a warm stone near the brazier, begins preening, oblivious to the history happening around him. Cleopatra begins to tell you stories. Not the kind you'll find in textbooks, these are her private versions. About the time she convinced an envoy she could speak 10 languages, she could, or the time she tried to make her own eyeliner and accidentally dyed her eyebrows green for a week. Historians still argue, she says, about whether I ruled with my heart or my head. She taps the side of the tub. I say, why not both? You nod, wondering how many scholars would faint if they knew the Queen of Egypt was musing about leadership while soaking in donkey milk. There's a pause, then a rustle of silk, and she stands graceful, glistening, statuesque. A servant immediately rushes forward with warm towels and a spritz of rosewater. Cleopatra dries, dresses, and departs, leaving behind a trail of scent and silence. You follow, eventually, led by the duck and a junior attendant who seems less and less convinced by the hour that this was in his job description. Back in the dressing room, you're offered a menu of salves. Yes, a menu. Almond oil, castor oil, beeswax balm, and a particularly suspicious pot labeled fermented date mask. You go with something safe, pomegranate oil, and begin rubbing it into your arms as another servant braids your hair with tiny bits of amber and lapis lazuli. You glimpse yourself in the mirror again. You're not sure if it's the milk or the lighting, but you've never looked this hydrated in your life. The duck sneezes. You both take that as a cue to exit the royal spa. As you're escorted down a long hallway inlaid with mosaics of Nile scenes, hippos, reeds, crocodiles wearing expressions of passive judgment, you pass what appears to be a private apothecary. Shelves of tiny vials line the walls, filled with dried herbs, crushed beetle shells, powdered pearls, and oils imported from 3 continents. You slow down. One vial is labeled Murex extract, and you wince. That's the purple dye made from thousands of crushed sea snails, famous for its cost, its smell, and its tendency to stain absolutely everything, including court treasuries. Do not touch, says a voice behind you. You turn. The royal apothecary stands there, a tall woman in saffron robes and a cap covered in stitched hieroglyphs. She looks you over like she's measuring your skin tone against possible tinctures. I heard you bathed in batch 47, she says, scribbling something in a wax tablet. That one had more chamomile. Observe and report effects. You blink. Is that required? All guests are test subjects, she says without smiling. Welcome to Cleopatra's palace. You and the duck exchange a look. This is going to be a long skincare regimen. You're ushered into what you assume is a casual sitting room, though by Cleopatra's standards it could probably host a minor diplomatic summit. Pillars carved with vines line the walls. A harpist plays softly in the corner while someone arranges fruit into a bowl so aesthetically perfect you're afraid to breathe near it. The duck immediately beelines for a pile of warm cushions and claims the highest one like a smug goose-shaped pharaoh. No one objects. You're starting to suspect he might outrank you here. Cleopatra reclines on a couch upholstered in purple linen, her arm resting lazily on a bolster shaped like a winged scarab. A servant delicately paints her nails with a mixture of crushed red ochre and olive oil. The effect is more subtle than modern polish, but no less regal. "I had a dream last night," she says, nibbling on a candied figure. "In it, my skin was made of marble, and everyone else's was sand." You're not sure how to respond, so you just nod like that's something you totally dream about all the time. She waves a hand. "I suppose that's why I'm so particular about my regimen. A queen must endure many things: envy, politics, Roman senators, but bad skin should never be one of them." You're handed a tray of oils to choose from. Again. This time, the options include blue lotus, fenugreek, and something labeled Anubis balm, which you're fairly certain is not FDA approved. You choose the lotus. It smells like a rainy day inside a silk tent. A servant begins to anoint your temples with it, and your thoughts start to drift. The music, the scent, the quiet clink of jewelry, it all starts to feel like a dream someone else is having. But Cleopatra is wide awake. She's now explaining the importance of color in one's appearance. Red ochre for lips. Malachite for eyes. Galena, of course, for contour. She gestures at her cheekbone, which is frankly intimidating in its geometry. "Historians still argue," she adds, "about whether we used cosmetics purely for beauty or for spiritual protection. I say, why not both?" A servant brings in a tiny mirror made of polished bronze. She inspects her reflection, adjusts a single curl, then tosses the mirror to you. "Check your symmetry," she says. You look. Your skin is dewy. Your eyes are slightly too wide. There is a smear of something under your jaw that smells like cinnamon and alarm. You look, historically, overwhelmed. The duck, now receiving his own temple massage, looks radiant. Of course he does. Cleopatra continues, now discussing water rituals. Always bathe in the early morning or late evening. Never midday. The sun is judgmental. You nod solemnly. Heard that. Outside, the light shifts. Long rays of late afternoon gold spill through the high windows, painting the room in slanted shadows. You're brought a bowl of warm water infused with hibiscus petals and a soft cloth. A hand gesture makes it clear you are to cleanse your hands and face. Again. You begin to understand, this is not self-care. This is a lifestyle. An empire of exfoliation. A political act of personal perfection. Cleopatra rests her chin on her palm and studies you. Most people think beauty is soft. They're wrong. It's discipline. It's armor. She leans forward. And it's weaponized when necessary. You suddenly remember she's been through at least 2 civil wars and seduced the 2 most powerful men of her time. She's not wrong. There's a knock at the door. A servant appears, whispers something in Egyptian, and Cleopatra sighs. "Duty calls," she says. She rises in one fluid motion, a living sculpture draped in linen and gold. "Walk with me," she says, and without waiting, exits into the corridor. You follow, half damp, half perfumed, all confused. The duck waddles behind with the air of someone who's been summoned to an emergency meeting of the Royal Board of Bathers. You pass through hallways lined with frescoes of Cleopatra in various triumphant poses on a barge, with an ASP next to Caesar, next to Mark Antony, next to herself. One room is filled entirely with amphorae labeled rose oil reserve. Another contains 6 cats lounging on embroidered cushions. Cleopatra pauses to scratch one behind the ears. It purrs like thunder trapped in silk. As you reach the grand hall, servants scatter like startled birds. A Roman envoy is waiting. He looks hot, irritated, and recently powdered. You recognize the look. It's the tried to flirt with Cleopatra and got tactically outmaneuvered face. She greets him with a nod and turns to you. "Stay and observe. You'll learn something." You lean against a pillar, trying to look like you belong. The duck perches beside you, also trying to look diplomatic. The Roman begins to speak. Something about grain shipments and harbor fees. You zone out halfway through the word tribute. Cleopatra listens, expression unreadable. Then she smiles slightly. "I see," she says. "So your Senate believes I am unreasonable?" The envoy stammers. "Well, not unreasonable. Perhaps, particular." She tilts her head. "Tell them I am no more particular than a Roman about his toga crease." The envoy blinks. She nods. "And tell them that for every shipment they delay, I will increase perfume exports." If Rome wishes to smell like war, who am I to argue? The envoy looks like he's reconsidering several life choices. As he bows and retreats, you whisper, "Was that a threat wrapped in a compliment?" She smiles. "Exactly." The duck sneezes. You take that as agreement. The sun has begun to dip. Outside, the city glows with the soft orange haze of early evening. Somewhere, a water seller calls out, and you catch the scent of bread baking from a distant courtyard. Cleopatra turns to you. "We haven't done the linen wrap yet." You blink. "The what now?" She gestures down the hallway. "Come. Let's bind you in lavender and let the oil settle overnight. If you're going to dream, you should do it hydrated." And just like that, you are swept back into the palace maze of unguents, silks, and relentless skincare. You look at the duck. He looks at you. Neither of you is ready. The linen room is somehow both more extravagant and more intimidating than you expect. It smells like clean laundry and crushed herbs, which doesn't sound particularly ominous until you realize the shelves are stacked floor to ceiling with bolts of fabric. A single gust of wind in here could probably bury a small army in spa towels. Cleopatra gestures toward a marble bench carved with lotus patterns. "Undress," she says simply, then catches your expression. "We wrap over under layers, courier. This isn't Rome." You nod, trying to look like someone who's ever experienced luxury without panicking. A pair of attendants, both dressed in robes so sheer they might qualify as mist, approach carrying baskets of folded linen and bowls filled with some kind of herbal paste that smells suspiciously like thyme and ancient secrets. You sit obediently as warm cloths are pressed to your arms and legs. They apply a thin layer of the mixture, part exfoliant, part moisturizer, part magic, you assume. And then begin wrapping you in long, narrow strips of linen. Not tight, not loose. Just enough to feel like you're being gently mummified by someone who really wants you to relax. Cleopatra observes this process with a glass of something purple and bubbling in hand. "Did you know linen was once considered more valuable than silver?" she says idly. "Priests wore it. Dead men were wrapped in it. And I sleep in nothing else." You're halfway through wondering whether she meant that as a humble brag when she continues. "We boil it in jasmine water. Softens the fibers. Helps the oils absorb. And discourages fleas." Your duck, meanwhile, is undergoing his own version of the treatment. One servant is brushing his feathers with something that smells like cardamom while another massages his webbed feet. He looks like a tiny, self-satisfied emperor. If you weren't wrapped like a spring roll, you might protest. "You must understand," Cleopatra says, swirling her drink, "that Egypt is dry. Not just the land, everything. The politics. The humor. The court gossip. Dry, dry, dry. One must remain supple or one cracks." She makes a slicing gesture across her palm, then smiles. "Cracks don't mend in palaces." There's something about the way she says it that makes you sit straighter, even beneath the layers. Not because it's frightening, though it is, but because it's true. A servant begins brushing your hair. You forgot you even had hair at this point, so this comes as a mild surprise. The brush has bristles made from softened reeds and is dipped in a blend of sesame oil and henna dust. Your scalp tingles like a prophecy. Cleopatra walks past you, trailing her fingers along the wall. "Historians still argue," she says, "whether I was obsessed with beauty for vanity, or whether it was my armor. My throne. My language." She turns, eyes glittering. "They never ask if it was fun." You blink. "Was it?" She grins. "It still is." Another servant appears with small clay cups of something warm. Yours tastes like spiced almond milk with honey and something faintly medicinal. The duck slurps his down in 3 blinks. You, still in your linen burrito state, sip slowly and try not to dissolve into a puddle of relaxation. The light in the room shifts again. Egyptian rooms are like that, constantly aware of the sun's drama. Shadows stretch long across the marble tiles. Someone begins to play a single reed flute, the notes winding through the air like curious cats. Cleopatra sits beside you, and for a moment, everything quiets. You speak without thinking. "Do you ever get tired of being iconic?" She chuckles, low and surprising. "Oh, endlessly. But it beats being forgettable." You both watch as a servant rearranges a tray of unguents by color, muttering softly in Greek about ratios. Cleopatra sips her drink. "I once told Caesar that legacy is a kind of perfume. You apply it generously, but never know who will catch the scent." You nod. "And who sneezes?" She laughs again. "Exactly." There's movement at the door. A palace aide arrives, whispering something about dinner preparations and a visiting merchant with ostrich feathers of unparalleled fluff. Cleopatra waves her off. Later. This one's still marinating. The aide bows and vanishes like a well-trained mirage. Cleopatra leans back, her gaze distant. You know, I tried to make the Nile flow backward once. You blink. Is that metaphorical? She doesn't answer. The duck hiccups. The wrapping is complete now. You look and feel like a ceremonial dumpling ready for divine presentation. You're handed a small stone seal to hold in your palm. Cleopatra explains, it's for dreams. Keep it in your hand while you sleep. If it's still there in the morning, the gods heard you. And if it's gone? You mispronounced something. Good to know. The linen is cooling now, drawing in the moisture, settling into your skin like soft armor. You can feel the tension leaving your calves, your shoulders, the space behind your eyes where schedules usually live. Cleopatra stands, stretches like a cat, and gestures for the duck to follow. He ignores her. She looks at you instead. Sleep here tonight. In this room. The oils need time. You glance around. With the jars? She nods. They like company. You lie back against the cushions, and someone, probably not the duck, drags a thin cotton net over your body. The scent of lavender and sandalwood rises around you like a lullaby. Cleopatra pauses at the doorway. Try not to snore, she says. The gods are light sleepers. She disappears, leaving only the glow of a clay lamp, the quiet rustle of perfumed cloth, and the slow, steady breathing of a duck who now looks like he's dreaming of empire. You close your eyes. You dream of rivers flowing backward, of feathers dipped in ink, of gold leaf floating across still water. You don't move. The seal stays in your hand. You wake up with a linen crease across your cheek and the distinct sense that the jars have been watching you all night. Not menacingly, more like politely curious statues judging your posture. The duck is already up, stretching his wings with a yawn that sounds deeply smug. He flaps twice, then settles next to a warm patch of sunlight streaming through the latticework of the chamber window. You consider joining him, but Cleopatra has other plans. A knock, soft, but pointed. A servant enters, carrying a tray balanced with surgical precision. There's a small bowl of barley porridge dusted with cinnamon, a palm-sized pomegranate, and what appears to be a single hard-boiled quail egg resting atop a folded linen square like it's royalty. You take this to mean breakfast is not a casual affair here. Cleopatra enters behind the tray, already mid-sentence. And then he had the gall to send me 13 ostrich feathers and no explanation. 13. Not an even dozen. Not a symbolic 14. 13. You sit up, blinking sleep from your eyes. Who? She waves a hand. Some Roman senator. They think gestures mean more if they're confusing. You nibble your porridge. It tastes like the inside of a temple in winter. Warm, clean, and slightly sacred. The duck pecks gently at your pomegranate. You push it closer to him. This seems to satisfy both of you. Cleopatra sits near your feet. Today, you learn about masks. You pause mid-bite. As in, facial? She smiles. As in everything. But yes, she means facial. You're led to another room, this one round, low-ceilinged, and filled with steam. The floor is tiled in blue-glazed faience shaped like fish scales. In the center stands a wide stone basin, steaming gently like a thoughtful soup. A servant is already preparing a mixture in a large bowl: crushed almonds, goat cream, powdered turquoise, and what appears to be a very expensive kind of mud. Cleopatra dips a finger in and tastes it. Too much rose, she mutters, and adds something from a pouch labeled only with a snake sigil. You decide not to ask. Did you know, she says, motioning for you to sit, that our enemies used to accuse me of hiding poison in beauty treatments? As if my cheek tint were a weapon. She shrugs. They weren't entirely wrong. As the paste is applied to your face, you begin to smell a mixture of honey, citrus, and something herbal that clears your nose with alarming efficiency. Your skin tightens as it dries. You attempt a facial expression and immediately regret it. The duck watches from a towel, eyes narrowed, probably calculating the exact moment he can mock you without consequence. Cleopatra lounges on a cushioned bench. The Greeks wore masks to portray gods, she muses. The Romans, to hide boredom. We wear them to remember who we are beneath them. You glance at her through drying mud. Is that paradox on purpose? She beams. Isn't everything? A servant enters carrying a scroll, sealed in violet wax. Cleopatra breaks it without hesitation and skeins the contents. Poem, she says, unimpressed. Something about the Nile and regret. Passable meter. She tosses it into a waiting urn labeled for later reflection or fire. You stare. That's a real category? She nods. Most things in life are. The paste begins to crack. A servant gently mists your face with jasmine water. Cleopatra watches, eyes half-lidded. Historians still argue, she says, whether I cultivated beauty for seduction or for spectacle. I think they forget it's also a form of storytelling. You try to nod. The paste prevents it. You blink slowly instead, which feels appropriately ceremonial. When I meet diplomats, she continues, I wear lapis. When I visit temples, I use coal mixed with ash. And when I host banquets, I wear nothing. Let the rumor fill the gap. She smirks. Nudity is more effective when it's a mystery. You attempt to respond, but the servant is now massaging your jawline with something slick and scented. You settle for a muffled grunt of respect. The duck is being pampered again. One of the attendants is buffing his claws with a cloth that may have once belonged to a high priest. Cleopatra eyes him and nods. He understands presentation. You begin to wonder if the duck is somehow gaining rank faster than you. After a long while, the mask is removed with warm cloths and murmured phrases in Old Coptic. Your face feels soft, clean, and somehow wiser. Cleopatra rises and claps her hands twice. Another servant enters with a tray of glass vials. These, she says, are not perfumes. They are weapons. She points to each one. Frankincense, for diplomacy. Cinnamon oil, for seduction. Myrrh, for mourning. Onion extract, for discouraging marriage proposals. You try to smile. It still hurts a little. Is that common? Cleopatra doesn't answer. She just uncorks the onion vial and waves it vaguely toward the duck. He sneezes. You are handed a small vial. Yours smells like mint and ink. Cleopatra studies your expression. Clarity. And record-keeping, she explains. You have the look of someone who forgets things on purpose. You're not sure whether to thank her. You're wrapped again, this time in silk, and seated near a brass mirror to observe the final touches. A delicate dusting of crushed pearl along your cheeks. A dot of wine-stained clay on your lower lip. The effect is not dramatic, but it is strangely convincing. You look like someone who belongs here, even if only temporarily. Cleopatra rises and places a ring in your palm. It's simple bronze, with a small scarab carved in relief. For memory, she says. Yours. Or mine. You nod, overwhelmed and oddly touched. The duck hops onto your shoulder, nuzzles your ear once, then sneezes dramatically into your hair. Cleopatra roars with laughter. Ready to continue your delivery? She asks. You are not. But you nod anyway. You emerge into the daylight feeling like a scented scroll. Your skin tingles with citrus and almond oil, your robe smells like a basil garden's memory, and the duck, who now has a single gilded feather affixed to his tail, is practically vibrating with smugness. The palace gates creak closed behind you as you rejoin the road. Ahead lies Alexandria's outer district, where papyrus scribes mingle with perfume vendors and every alley echoes with the cries of street poets hoping to be discovered before lunchtime. You glance at your satchel. The gold-lacquered scroll rests inside, practically humming with importance or perhaps instability. Cleopatra said it was for a court scribe in Xiangan. That's not exactly walking distance. But first, you have a route to finish in Alexandria. The duck leads. You follow. The city changes flavor block by block. First come the bookbinders, dusty, inky people hunched over low tables, stitching spines with threads so fine they might have been pulled from spider dreams. One of them waves at you absently. Courier, he asks, not looking up. You nod. He returns to his task. You round a corner and nearly trip over a man sculpting a bust out of bread dough. He looks up. Too late for morning mail? You shrug. Only if it spoils. He nods sagely. Art does. You press on. Soon, you reach a shady courtyard where a woman stands over a wide basin filled with rosewater and what looks suspiciously like shredded letters. Wrong addresses, she says, catching your glance. Or wrong century. You sit for a moment on the edge of the stone wall. A cat blinks at you from under a cart. The duck watches it like he's assessing a rival. You feel an odd peace settle over the square, like the sun's paused for a breath. A boy runs past, carrying a scroll tied with seaweed. Another follows, shouting, "It's for the fish." You don't ask. The next message drop takes you to a modest garden temple tucked between spice shops and astrologers. The priestess is young, barefoot, and surrounded by incense so thick the air shimmers like silk. She accepts the scroll with a nod and places it gently on an altar already crowded with marigolds and coins. For Thoth, she says. He prefers poetry. You nod. Don't we all? She smiles. Not everyone. The crocodile god prefers lists. The duck, oddly, seems to approve of this. You think he might be a closet administrator. Back in the alley, a small group of dancers twirls past, jingling with silver anklets and laughter. They part around you without slowing down, like a river that knows not to disturb a stone. One of them tosses you a petal. Another winks at the duck. He preens for a full block. As you continue toward the harbor, the sun climbs higher. The whitewashed walls glow. You pass a baker pulling flatbreads from a clay oven shaped like a smiling god. He offers you one, hot and scorched with sesame. For the road, he says. The duck grabs it and flings it into your satchel like a prize. And then, there it is. The library. Or what's left of it. The main steps rise like memory itself, wide, weathered, and cracked with time. Pillars stand on either side like guards who've grown tired of standing but refuse to fall. Above the lintel, faint words in Greek still declare, House of the Muses. A man in a blue robe leans against one of the columns. You delivering to a librarian, he asks. Sort of, you reply. He waves you through. Try not to breathe too loud in there. They're copying vowels today. Inside, the air smells of parchment and sandalwood. Dust motes float in beams of light like alphabet soup for ghosts. A dozen scribes sit hunched over desks, scratching away like over-caffeinated locusts. One of them waves you over with a feather pen. "You're late," she says without looking up. "I'm not sure I'm early either," you reply. She nods. "Fair." You hand her a scroll marked with a red ribbon. She sniffs it. Papyrus grade 2. Ointment ink. Southern scribe? You blink. That's exactly right. She shrugs. We read with more than eyes. The duck hops onto a stool beside her and starts pecking at a wax tablet. She does not object. "I have a message for Xiang'an next," you mention, quietly. She looks up, finally. "East?" You nod. She whistles low. "Long way. Mountains. Rivers. Very opinionated tea." You nod again. "I've packed citrus." She hands you a scroll. "Then you'll survive." As you leave, she calls after you. "Tell them the library still dreams." You pause at the doorway. Do the dreams come true? Only if you carry them well. Outside, the duck squints at the sun and begins waddling with purpose. You adjust your satchel. It's heavier now, physically and metaphorically. One scroll to a temple. Another to a tea master in the foothills. The lacquered one, still pulsing gently, waiting to cross borders. You pass the last row of white stone homes. A palm tree leans over a garden wall. Someone plays a flute behind a curtain. The duck, for once, is silent. Historians still argue whether Alexandria's final days were quiet or filled with flame. Whether the library burned slowly over centuries or all at once in a careless war. Some say the knowledge survived in whispers, in songs, in scribes who became couriers who became myths. You are not a myth. You are tired, a little sunburned, and slightly afraid of the scroll that smells like incense and diplomacy. But you are part of the line now. The duck nips your ankle gently. It's time to go. You begin walking east. You follow the dusty road eastward, leaving the remnants of Alexandria's once mighty library behind, the lacquered scroll nestled carefully beside your heart. The sun's warmth turns the landscape into rippling gold, as if the earth itself is yawning from the morning's slumber. Your boots press into the packed earth, sending tiny plumes of dust swirling around the duck's webbed feet. He paces ahead with unprecedented enthusiasm. Perhaps he's eager for breakfast, or perhaps he senses the approach of a new chapter in this journey. Ahead, you spot a cluster of low buildings with terracotta roofs and whitewashed walls. A hand-painted sign swings in the breeze, Tea Master's House, Foothills Blend. Beneath it, a narrow path zigzags up toward a veranda shaded by woven reed screens. You climb the steps, the duck waddling dutifully behind, and arrive at a small courtyard. A jade fountain murmurs at the center, its water tinted faintly green from crushed tea leaves. A stout man in a saffron tunic emerges, hair tied back with a linen cord, hands stained the color of brewed oolong. "You must be the courier," he says with a booming laugh that rattles the lanterns overhead. He pats the teak server beside him. "I am Shinfu, tea master of these hills. What leaves do you carry?" You present him with the scroll from Cleopatra's apothecary, its wax seal still bright. He inspects it with a practiced eye, then tucks it beneath his sash. "Tea first," he declares, beckoning you to sit on a stone bench. The duck hops up beside you and settles in like a monarch surveying his domain. Shinfu lifts a small bowl, pouring steaming amber liquid into delicate porcelain cups. The aroma is heady, jasmine, mint, and something you can't name. You sip, letting the warmth swirl down your throat. Instantly, tension melts from your shoulders. Your satchel feels lighter. Even the lacquered scroll seems less foreboding. This blend, Shinfu says, is made only on foggy mornings when dew still clings to the leaves. Perfect for a courier who has traveled far and dreams of sleep. You nod. It's divine. The tea master watches you with twinkling eyes. Stories tell of tea that heals wounds, sharpens mind, lulls to sleep. Historians still argue whether these tales are truth or elaborate marketing. I say, taste and decide. You exchange glances with the duck, who lets out a contemplative HRRRK as if offering a verdict. While you sip, a group of villagers arrives, carrying baskets of fresh tea leaves and small clay jars of honey. They kneel, presenting their offerings to Shinfu. He nods to you. This is the true harvest, community, ceremony, and the earth's bounty. You'd expected a single temple or a tea shop. Instead, this feels like an entire world built around a leaf. The sunlight filters through bamboo screens, creating a lattice of light on the courtyard floor. Cicadas hum as if in approval. After the ceremony, Shinfu unwraps another scroll, handing it to you. For the governor's daughter in Mytian. She adores stories of Cleopatra. He bows. May your path be sweet, like this tea. You bow in return, tucking the new scroll into your pouch alongside the gilt-edged letter. The duck quacks with satisfaction, as if endorsing the exchange. As you turn to leave, Shinfu calls after you, remember, tea unites strangers. May your next cup be shared. You smile. I'll raise a cup to that. Walking down the zigzag path, the world feels renewed. Fields of tea plants stretch across the hillside like emerald waves. The duck struts ahead, chin raised. Your next stop, Mytian, where the governor's daughter awaits a tale of hair dye disasters and donkey milk indulgences. The road winds downward now, the sun's slanted rays painting every leaf and stone with soft copper light. You breathe deeply, tasting the memory of jasmine on your tongue. And you both drift along, tea bolstered, toward the next chapter. The campfire crackles softly behind you as you rise with the dawn, stretching joints that feel older than they should. The duck is already awake again. He's staring intently at a trail of beetles weaving across the sand like a living script. You wonder if he's trying to interpret it. Maybe he's just hungry. Either way, he looks at peace, and that's rare enough to cherish. You set off early, the rest of the caravan still dozing. The desert air is crisp, cool enough that you keep your cloak tight around your shoulders. The road ahead is dry, flat, and achingly bright, like someone tried to draw a horizon and gave up halfway. Your destination today is a tea outpost perched at the crossroads between trade lanes. Not glamorous. Not large. But famous for two things: letters that arrive slightly before they're sent, and tea so strong it might realign your spine. The duck waddles beside you with new purpose. Perhaps he's thinking about the tea too. Or perhaps he just remembers the outpost's last grain shipment and intends to steal from it again. You don't ask. Some questions are best left unanswered. A few miles in, the terrain shifts. The dust gives way to hardened clay, riddled with wheel ruts and hoofprints. You pass the remains of a waymarker, long since toppled, its engraving eroded into an unreadable murmur. You pause to balance it upright again. Not because you have to, but because something about it feels important, like a sigh left hanging in midair. You press on. By mid-morning, you hear singing. Not words, exactly, just a melody humming through the air like it's been caught in the wind. You follow it until you find the source. A one-wheeled cart being pushed by a man with the build of a philosopher and the beard of a hermit. Balanced atop the cart is a cage full of reeds. Inside the reeds, you realize with no small amount of surprise, are frogs. Singing frogs. Or at least, very optimistic croakers. He nods at you.
Courier? You nod back. You?
Messenger of moods, he says proudly.
I deliver ambience. You blink. You deliver ambience? Yes, he says. People order it. I bring it.
Frogs, wind chimes, haunted pan flute duets.
Yesterday someone asked for light melancholy with notes of cinnamon. Had to borrow a goat.
You decide not to engage further, but he presses a small paper scroll into your hand anyway. For the tea outpost, he says.
Tell them it's best unwrapped at sunset. You thank him.
He waves, and the frogs croak in four-part harmony as he rolls away. The duck squints after the cart, then lets out a single, judgmental honk.
You continue walking.
The outpost comes into view around noon, nestled in a dip between two gently sloping hills. It's made of sun-baked bricks, low and wide, with a tiled roof and a bell hung from a crooked beam. A row of wind catchers lines the roof, humming faintly in the breeze. Outside, a woman sits on a reed mat beneath a faded umbrella, sipping from a cup so small it might legally count as symbolic. She doesn't look up as you approach, just gestures to the bench beside her. You're the one with the duck, she says, before you can speak.
You nod and sit. I'm Auntie Lynn, she continues. I run the place. Technically. Mostly it runs itself.
She pours you a cup from her pot and hands it over.
Drink carefully. It knows your secrets. You sip. The tea is strong. Dark. Earthy.
With a smoky undertone that feels like someone translated a forest into liquid and added a pinch of emotional stability.
You let out a long breath.
The duck pecks at the rim of your cup, then sits, as if satisfied you're finally participating in civilized rituals. You hand over the lacquered scroll from Cleopatra. Lynn raises an eyebrow but says nothing. She examines the seal, nods once, and tucks it into a side pouch. You're behind schedule, she says gently.
Blame the frog guy, you reply. She chuckles. I always do.
From inside the building, a boy appears with a fresh scroll and a pouch of dried citrus peel. Take these north, Lynn says.
And tell the scribe at the obsidian watchtower he still owes me a napkin. You agree without fully understanding the implications.
Before leaving, you glance at the pile of mail inside her sorting basket.
Half of it is tied with waxed string.
One is wrapped in cloth printed with stars.
Another simply says, to whom it may sleepily concern. You step back into the sun. The duck follows, stretching his wings with theatrical flair.
You climb again, the path narrowing, the horizon pulling you upward.
Below, the tea outpost shrinks into a dot.
A breeze kicks up, dry and clean, lifting the dust from your boots and tossing it behind you like an erased memory. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra's beauty routine included tea from this region. Some claim she drank it to settle her nerves before royal audiences. Others say it was used only in rituals. A few scholars maintain she preferred wine and the tea was for her couriers, like a bribe to keep them from reading too much. You walk until the sun dips low, painting the cliffs around you in soft copper and ink. You stop near a ledge to watch the sky unfurl, slow and sure, like someone pouring milk into blue silk.
The frogman was right. The scroll feels different now. You unwrap it. It reads, "A moment of stillness is its own letter." Signed, the Ambience Department. You smile.
You and the duck settle for the night beneath a knotted olive tree, satchel close, tea warmth lingering in your chest.
And the frogs?
Somewhere, faintly, they sing. You wake to the sound of your duck gently stomping on a nearby beetle. It is unclear whether this is an act of breakfast or vengeance. Either way, the morning is cool and soft, the sky smeared in pale peach and lavender like Cleopatra's favorite eyeshadow, probably. You stretch, bones complaining, and sit up beneath the olive tree. Above you, a bird calls out once and then goes quiet again, as if it just wanted to remind you it exists. Today's destination is the Obsidian Watchtower, perched at the edge of a cliff that overlooks 3 valleys and at least 4 contradictory weather systems. You've heard rumors about it for weeks. Some couriers say the stairs inside move when no one's looking. Others swear it's guarded by an old scholar who speaks in riddles and throws feathers at guests. All you know is that you have a scroll for him, and Cleopatra's court was very particular about timely delivery. Especially when it involves astrology reports, ceremonial bathwater samples, or, in this case, an annotated poem about horseradish. The path winds upward, dusty and cracked. Your boots scuff against stone. The duck waddles ahead with remarkable determination, wings slightly extended like he's ready to argue with gravity itself. Every few steps, he pauses to glance back and make sure you haven't fainted. By late morning, the tower finally comes into view. It's tall, narrow, and darker than the surrounding cliffs, a jagged finger pointed skyward, built entirely of black volcanic glass. A shimmering ring of heat rises from its base, making it look like it's melting into the land. The door is arched, set with brass, and slightly ajar. A hand-painted sign reads, "Please knock politely. Feather quotas enforced." You knock. A pause. Then a scraping sound. Then a voice, "Enter, unless you're a feather inspector." You push open the door. Inside, the air smells like parchment, cloves, and stubbornness. Scrolls are piled everywhere, on shelves, in baskets, in teacups. A spiral staircase curls up the center of the tower like a very confused cinnamon roll. At the far end of the room stands a man in indigo robes, sorting feathers by color and muttering about betrayal. "You're late," he says without looking up. "There was a frog cart," you offer. He nods as if that explains everything. "Did Lynn send my napkin?" You pull out the scroll and the pouch of dried citrus peel. No napkin, but she included this. He opens the pouch, sniffs, and smiles. Close enough. The duck hops onto a bench and stares at a diagram labeled "star positions" that offended me. "Scroll, please," the man says. You hand it over. He unrolls it with delicate fingers. It crackles ominously. "Ah," he says, tracing the lines. "Yes. This is about the horseradish." You blink. "Excuse me?" "Her Highness's recipe archive," he explains. She believed horseradish increased clarity of thought, particularly when paired with cucumber slices and reading tax policy out loud. Did it work? He looks at you. Have you ever tried reading Roman tax laws while chewing root vegetables? No, then you live a blessed life. He scribbles something on a bit of scrap parchment, folds it, and seals it with wax in the shape of a small, unimpressed donkey. "Return this to the Ministry of Culinary Protocol," he says. "And tell them I said the vinegar ratios are wrong again." You tuck it into your satchel, wondering what sort of culinary empire Cleopatra ruled with this much bureaucracy. Before you leave, the man gestures toward the stairs. Go up. The view is good for forgetting. You climb, duck in tow. At the top, the tower opens to a balcony with no railing and an unfair amount of sky. The wind howls, pushing at your cloak, carrying with it the scent of salt and something almost floral. Below, the valleys spread like wrinkled parchment, fields, villages, rivers that glint like silver thread. You and the duck sit side by side. "I think I get it," you whisper. The duck honks gently. Agreement, or hunger?
Historians still argue whether Cleopatra's obsession with wellness extended into metaphysical theories. Some suggest she corresponded with astronomers in far-off provinces about the best times to bathe or write angry letters. Others believe the records were exaggerated to justify massive perfume shipments. The truth, as always, is elusive. But here, staring into the endless folds of the land, you can't help but feel she would have approved of this spot. Before heading back down, you leave a coin on the windowsill and a plucked feather from your duck, who glares at you for a full 10 seconds before forgiving the offense. The descent is quiet. The scholar has vanished into his scroll nests. You exit the tower into full sunlight. The heat presses down, the duck waddles into your shadow, and together you start back down the ridge. A merchant trail forks nearby. One branch toward the ministry, one toward a place you haven't visited yet, a hamlet whispered about among couriers. The kind of place where letters linger longer than they should, and messages sometimes reply to themselves. You don't know why, but the duck picks that path. So you follow. The path the duck has chosen, or perhaps summoned, is narrower than you'd like, edged with stones that seem purposefully misplaced. Bushes crowd the sides, heavy with berries you're half sure are decorative poison. But the duck marches on, his pace steady, his beak held high like a courier with a secret. And let's be honest, at this point, he probably has one. The hamlet doesn't appear so much as reveal itself. Hazy rooftops through the trees, soft bells in the air, faint laughter that may or may not be coming from actual people. You descend through a row of bent cedar trees, their trunks bowed like old monks, and step onto a stone path that leads into the village square. No one greets you. Not right away. The houses are small, worn, but lovingly maintained. Dried herbs hang in bundles from the eaves, and paper lanterns sway gently in the shade. There's a smell here. Of something baking, of ink, and also of salt water, though you are nowhere near the sea. You pass an empty bench. Then a potter's stand. Then a well with a crank that creaks once, then stops. Then you hear it. Courier. A woman sits just beyond the square under an arbor of vines, her lap filled with threadwork that seems to move even when her fingers are still. Her eyes are sharp and quiet, the way cliffs are sharp and quiet before someone falls off them. She doesn't stand. I wasn't expecting a duck. You glance down. The duck, for once, is still. Perfectly still. Like a statue. Or a decoy. The woman sets aside her cloth and gestures toward a nearby table, where a scroll waits already wrapped, sealed, and labeled in ink so black it almost swallows the sunlight. That's for the songkeeper, she says. You'll know him when you hear him. You hesitate. And he lives, she shrugs. Where the wind forgets the tune. Very helpful. You accept the scroll, slide it into your satchel. It fits a little too perfectly, like it was made to go there all along. The duck finally moves, shaking once and flapping his wings like someone just dismissed a memory. Wait, the woman says, standing at last. She hands you a coin. It's not copper or bronze, but something older, worn smooth and etched with a symbol you don't recognize. She doesn't explain. You don't ask. Back on the trail, the trees close around you again, thicker now, the shadows deeper. The duck hums. Or maybe that's just your brain trying to fill the silence. The land begins to climb again, gentle at first, then more insistently. Moss takes over the rocks. The sun slips behind a curtain of clouds. You reach a fork where one path is cobbled, neat and inviting, and the other is dirt, crooked, and looks like it's been weeping quietly for several centuries. The duck, naturally, takes the sad path. You mutter something about dramatic instincts and follow. As you walk, the air changes, lighter, colder, filled with something electric. The trees hush themselves. Every leaf seems to wait. And then, from somewhere in the distance, a sound. Music. Not quite singing, not quite an instrument. It shimmers and bends like water in moonlight. It doesn't get louder as you approach, it just becomes clearer. Notes that loop and twist in patterns too precise to be random. Too fluid to be memorized. And then you see him. The songkeeper. He sits on a rock carved with spiral patterns, surrounded by birds. Not the flashy, noble sort, just robins, sparrows, a few tired doves. He holds a flute carved from bone or branch, and his clothes are layered in patchwork grays and soft greens, like he's spent his life trying not to be noticed by trees. He stops playing the moment you're close enough to hear your own heartbeat. "You've brought it," he says. Again, not a question. You nod and hand over the scroll. He doesn't open it. Just presses it to his forehead for a moment, then sets it aside. Do you want to know what it says? You pause. Yes. He smiles, and somehow that smile is older than you are. It's not written in words. Not anymore. Just tone. And weight. And memory. You pretend that makes sense. The duck hops up beside him, perching calmly, like he belongs to the forest more than he ever did to you. The songkeeper reaches down and taps your satchel. You've got the next message already, don't you? You check. A scroll you didn't put there now rests between the others. Sealed with wax in the shape of a lyre. You exhale. Is it always like this? The songkeeper tilts his head. Like what? You gesture vaguely. The scrolls. The detours. The feathered companions. Only for the ones who listen. You don't know if that's a compliment or a warning. He gestures toward a narrow trail that threads through the underbrush and disappears behind a stone arch so overgrown it barely qualifies as architecture anymore. That way, he says. And thank you. You start down the trail, glancing back once. The songkeeper has already returned to his music. Historians still argue whether individuals like the songkeeper ever truly existed. Folk memory, some say, or exaggerated metaphors for traveling minstrels. But a few recovered scrolls mention the term voice archivist, and one broken flute recovered from a ruin bore the phrase, where the wind forgets the tune. You walk. The duck follows. The stone arch closes behind you like the final note of a forgotten song. The trail ahead is half swallowed by moss, half remembered by the forest. It doesn't twist or wind. It flows, like someone brushed it across the hills with a bamboo fan. Every now and then you spot a small wooden marker carved with a single character: echo, silence, stillness. Encouraging stuff. The duck keeps pace without a sound, as if even his waddles are in awe. Occasionally he sniffs at patches of lichen like they're old friends. It's deeply unnerving how familiar he seems with this path. You start to wonder if he's leading you not forward, but back to something you forgot. You reach a rise in the land where the trees part just enough to frame a view, low valleys stitched with fog, the thinnest thread of a river reflecting light like a polished mirror, and distant rooftops folded into the hills like origami secrets. You sit for a moment beneath a gnarled pine. The duck hops onto a nearby root and tucks his head beneath a wing. This is peace. Or close enough. But scrolls don't deliver themselves. You shoulder the satchel, and it thumps with familiar weight. Among the dozen or so you now carry, one remains cold to the touch, the cursed one, allegedly. You still haven't opened it, haven't even looked at the tag again. It watches you through layers of cloth and wax. You can feel it judging your posture.
The forest thins, and eventually gives way to a wide gravel path lined with steely, stone pillars etched with poetry, or maybe complaints.
One reads, "I walked too far. Send sandals." Another simply says, "Regret."
Then, almost suddenly, you arrive at a stone courtyard.
It's quiet. Too quiet. You glance around. No people. No signs of life. And then out of the silence a low gong. You nearly jump.
From the far side of the courtyard, a figure emerges. Robed in ash gray, hood pulled low, moving like a page turned slowly.
"Courier," he says. The voice is dry. Unbothered by echo. You nod. Yes. Follow. You do. What else are you going to do?
The building he leads you into is shaped like a scroll case, long, narrow, windowless.
The walls inside are lined with niches, and in each niche rests a scroll.
Some are wrapped in silk, others bare and crumbling. The air smells like dry paper and secrets.
He leads you to a table at the end of the hall, where a set of documents await, one with your name already written across the top in calligraphy more elegant than your self-esteem. "This is your route review," he says, handing it over.
You stare.
My what? All couriers must undergo quarterly evaluations. But I've only been doing this for, time is relative in the courier registry.
You glance at the duck. He is pretending not to exist. The man opens a ledger the size of a bathhouse door and begins reading aloud, "Ducked from duty, once.
Duck-led detour, twice. Scroll damage reported, 1. Emotional damage inflicted by scroll, undetermined." You raise a hand.
That scroll leaked perfume.
It wasn't my fault.
The registry makes no assumptions. He slides a second scroll toward you.
Your next destination. You sigh and pick it up. It's warm.
He smiles, which is somehow worse than if he'd frowned. As you turn to leave, he calls after you, "There's a shortcut through the glade. If the stone sings, walk faster." You choose not to unpack that statement. Back outside, the duck lets out a quack that sounds like bureaucracy if you squint your ears. You follow the path to the glade, which is lush, quiet, and disturbingly musical.
Not in a bird's chirping way.
More in a "the rocks hum when you step near them" way.
You try not to listen. You walk faster. Eventually, the humming fades.
And you find yourself at a crossroads marked only by a tattered red ribbon tied around a stick.
You stop.
The duck stares.
Then, from behind a rock, a voice, "Password?" You blink. What?
A teenager climbs out from a hidden alcove in the earth, covered in dust and sass.
"Password," he repeats. I don't. I wasn't given one.
He shrugs.
No password, no passage. You fold your arms.
I've walked 2 provinces, climbed 3 mountains, been attacked by a boar, and held back tears over a poetry scroll that smelled like bathwater.
I'm not turning around because you want a password. The duck quacks loudly.
The teen pauses.
Is the duck with you? You nod. He nods back. Fine. That counts.
He lifts a trapdoor hidden beneath moss and gestures for you to pass. You do down into a narrow tunnel lined with mushrooms and lit by fireflies in jars.
It's cooler down here. And oddly cozy.
You emerge onto the other side of the hill, blinking against sudden sunlight.
Ahead, a winding road. A fruit stand. A goat eating a sign that once said welcome. You're getting close.
The duck does a tiny victory dance.
And just like that, you're back on the road.
Historians still argue whether certain courier posts employed underground passages to protect high-priority deliveries.
Some records suggest hidden tunnels between provinces.
Others dismiss them as courier campfire stories, just legends told to scare new recruits. But standing here, scrolls tucked safe, duck at your side, and mushroom tunnel behind you, you know better.
You walk on.
You pass the goat, who gives you a side-eye that implies he's read more scrolls than you have. The fruit stand, unmanned but meticulously arranged, sits under a sun-bleached parasol. You consider taking a plum and leaving a coin, but the duck glares at you.
Apparently, we don't rob the honor system produced today. The road ahead curves gently along the hillside, flanked by golden fields.
The stalks sway in rhythmic unison, like they're applauding your persistence. You take a bow, but the scroll satchel is cutting into your shoulder again.
It's almost noon.
You know this because the heat is rising, the insects are louder, and you're starting to consider whether your own feet are worth trading for hooves.
The duck waddles in a perfect zigzag, occasionally stopping to inspect a caterpillar or insult a rock.
Eventually, the road narrows into a ridge, just wide enough for one cart or, in this case, one courier and a duck with questionable spatial awareness. To the left, a sheer drop into misty green nothing. To the right, a steep incline crawling with thistles and stubborn shrubs. You walk the center, as carefully as a monk balancing soup. You're halfway across when the wind picks up. At first, it's a whisper. Then a stronger sigh, then a full-body gust that flaps your sleeves and threatens to file your satchel under missing. You crouch, shielding the scrolls. The duck leans into the breeze, feathers ruffled, as if daring the sky to try harder. You both make it across, barely,
and collapse under the shade of a stunted cedar. The satchel is intact. The scrolls are dry.
You, however, have acquired 3 new sweat patches and a permanent mistrust of ridgelines. From here, you spy the next outpost, a cluster of thatched roofs hugging a lazy bend in the river.
Smoke curls from chimneys. A water wheel turns slowly in the sunlight. You pick yourself up and carry on.
As you enter the village, a dog barks once, then decides you're not interesting enough to pursue. Children chase each other around bundles of drying herbs.
An old man snoozes under a painted sign that reads, "Official courier meals half price, scroll must be visible." Good enough.
You duck inside the tea shack and find a table near the open window. A woman appears with a pot of chrysanthemum tea and a plate of warm rice dumplings stuffed with gingered yam. "You smell like road," she observes gently.
You smile.
"I wear it with pride." As you eat, you hear snippets of local gossip.
A crane laid eggs on the temple roof, a traveling poet offended the mayor's mustache, someone's goat tried to enroll in the academy.
The duck soaks all this in with regal indifference. Refueled and slightly more human, you visit the outpost clerk, an elderly man with translucent eyebrows and a scroll tattooed on the back of one hand. He accepts your courier token, examines your receipts, and makes a satisfied noise somewhere between a hum and a snore. "You've come far," he says, thumbing through your stack. "Most couriers don't make it past the singing stones."
"You've heard them too?" He nods. "Heard, stepped on, wrote them a poem once. They never replied."
You pass him the cursed scroll.
He recoils slightly, then nods.
"We'll send this through back channels.
Can't risk any poetic curses during cabbage season." You don't ask. He returns your token and adds a slip of paper to your pack.
Directions to your next stop, a quiet village where monks are said to illuminate scrolls using crushed pearls and moonlight.
Very niche. You take a moment to stand outside, letting the wind cool your neck.
The duck lies flat on the ground like a punctuation mark that's lost its sentence. "It's been a long journey already," but this little hill town, this honest tea, this odd job, it started to feel familiar. Not home, exactly, but a version of it.
A moving home.
One that smells of ink and rice and duck feathers. As you set out again, the road turns once more, now framed by ginkgo trees whose fan-shaped leaves shimmer gold in the sunlight. You pass a shrine built into the base of one such tree. Someone has left an offering, a scroll too old to read, tied with a string of plum pits. You leave one of your own, your receipt from the last post, folded neatly.
A gesture. A record. A hope. The duck bows slightly.
Or maybe he just trips.
You walk on.
The air smells of pine and ink and something a little like cardamom.
A breeze picks up behind you. You hear a bell chime faintly, though there's no temple nearby. You're not far now.
Not far from the last stop on this route. Not far from turning in your logbook and sleeping on something other than moss or roof tiles. Historians still argue whether traveling couriers formed unofficial networks of knowledge, passing notes, advice, and superstitions from post to post. Some say a secret handbook once circulated, filled with riddles, recipes, and route shortcuts.
Others dismiss this as courier legend, made up to entertain tired feet.
But you think of the ridge with its wind, the boy with the password, the scholar who gave you a poem on silk, the scarecrow that looked back, and you know there's a truth that doesn't need to be proven.
The duck lets out a satisfied squawk. You nod.
Almost there. The ginkgo leaves flutter behind you as the road dips once more, carrying you toward lower valleys where the river glides like a silver ribbon stretched across silk. Your satchel sways gently with each step, weighted with scrolls, receipts, and the faint, lingering smell of ginger broth. The duck walks a pace ahead, puffed up with what can only be described as professional pride.
The air is cooler now.
The shift from late afternoon to early evening drapes the landscape in a soft, amber haze.
Every shadow is longer.
Every sound feels rounder, slower, as if the world itself is winding down for a nap. You pass a group of schoolchildren sitting cross-legged beside a traveling teacher. She's drawing characters in the dirt with a bamboo stick, reciting a rhyme that involves cloud shapes and historical emperors with questionable judgment. One child spots the duck and gasps.
Look! A divine messenger. The duck blinks once, thoroughly unimpressed. You bow slightly and continue. The teacher offers you a fig and a knowing nod.
Be careful past the rice fields, she murmurs.
A heron has been stealing inkstones. You nod gravely. I'll defend my calligraphy with honor. The duck honks in solidarity.
Farther along, the road curves into a cypress grove.
The scent of resin and wet bark fills your lungs.
A wooden post marks a trail split. One sign reads Xiang'an, 12 li, while the other simply says not recommended.
You pick Xiang'an.
Mostly because your job requires it, but also because the other sign feels like it knows too much. A light rain begins to fall, barely more than mist, but enough to slick the path in patches.
You keep your pace even.
The duck adjusts without comment, his feathers beating droplets like polished jade. If he ever writes a memoir, this will probably be chapter 7, Through Drizzle and Doubt. As you approach the town limits, a small bridge spans a quiet stream.
A man stands mid-span, holding a lantern despite the fading light.
His hat is wide-brimmed and patched.
His robe is simple, cinched with twine.
He watches you approach with the air of someone who's seen many things and is mildly disappointed by most of them.
Courier, he asks.
You nod, brushing damp hair from your forehead.
From Maishan. He tilts his lantern. Got anything cursed?
Possibly, you say. But it's wrapped in extra cloth.
Fair enough, he grunts, then steps aside.
The duck bows politely.
The man bows back. Xiangyan is more village than city, low buildings, lanterns hung in uneven rows, stone alleys worn smooth by time and rain.
You cross a courtyard where monks are tending to a garden by lamplight.
The plants glow faintly in the wet dusk: lotus, mint, something purple you don't recognize.
You pause to inhale deeply. The scent is calming, like lullabies made into steam.
The regional scriptorium is just ahead,
marked by a carved stone lintel and 2 iron lanterns that sputter gently in the breeze.
You knock.
The door creaks open to reveal a thin, elegant woman in slate-gray robes, spectacles perched halfway down her nose.
She nods once. I'm the night clerk. You offer your courier token and present the lacquered scroll from the painter.
She takes it as if it's a sleeping child, handling it with reverence.
We've been expecting this, she says. It'll go directly to the senior archivist. You hesitate, then lower your voice. Is it true the scroll was whispered to him by a breeze? She doesn't blink. Winds hold many things.
You'd be surprised. She adds your name to a logbook, her brushstrokes quick but deliberate.
Then she hands you a cloth-wrapped bundle. For the northern monastery, she says. It's a reply. You glance at the seal. It's silver wax, stamped with a crescent moon and a lotus petal.
The duck perks up as if recognizing something you don't. Before you leave, the clerk offers you a cup of warm plum wine and a candied ginger. You accept both, grateful for the sweetness and the heat. As you sip, she says, not many last this long.
You've carried knowledge. That matters. You nod. Even the soggy scrolls?
Especially those, she replies.
Ink is persistent.
Even when it runs, it stains. You step out into the street, duck following, the sky now fully dusk.
Xiangyan is quiet but alive. Shadows moving behind paper screens, bells chiming faintly from temples, laughter tucked away in hidden courtyards.
The moon rises like a shy coin behind clouds.
You find a bench beneath a willow and sit for a moment.
The duck climbs beside you, settles, and rests his head on your boot. There's still a day's journey ahead. Still scrolls to carry. Still odd encounters to endure. But here, now, in this moment of night-scented calm, you let yourself breathe.
Historians still debate whether the last legs of courier journeys were the hardest or the most transcendent. Some argue that exhaustion bred sloppiness.
Others say that by the end, the messenger became the message itself, a vessel shaped by the road, the silence, the strain, and the scrolls.
You don't know which is true.
But you do know the duck snores like a sage.
And that seems like wisdom enough. The next morning greets you with a gentle clamor.
Wooden chimes, sweeping brooms, a tea ladle striking the rim of a kettle. Xiangyan is waking up the way some cities dream, slowly, with grace, and a faint hum of poetry in the air. You rise from your bench bed under the willow, joints creaking just enough to remind you that rest is relative when you sleep sitting up. The duck is already alert, pecking softly at a fallen lotus petal like he's sampling the town's literary flavor. Your next task lies to the north, where a monastery perches on the slope of a long-extinct volcano, its name translated loosely to the Temple of Thoughtful Pause. Fitting, since it takes about 2 hours of slow uphill hiking to reach, and every step feels like a lesson in humility. But before you go, you make a quiet visit to the town's public water garden. A square pond framed with smooth stones, lily pads drifting like green coins across the surface. A woman kneels at the edge, releasing a paper boat inscribed with a poem. You don't ask her why. Some things are between the wind and the ink. On the way out of Xiangyan, a baker offers you a rice bun for stamina, and a street poet slips you a haiku on a scrap of tea-stained cloth. It reads, scrolls on the shoulder, duck eyes the sky for omen, 2 couriers walk. You smile, fold it, and tuck it between your dispatches. The trail to the monastery begins in a grove of wind chimes.
Not metaphorical ones. Real ones.
Dozens of them, strung from low branches and carefully tuned. As you pass, they tinkle like polite applause, or like spirits whispering encouragement.
The duck quacks softly, as if joining the chorus. The climb begins.
The first stretch is paved, carefully laid stone tiles with calligraphy etched between them. Quotes from sages, proverbs, occasionally just one word, breathe, step, or, confusingly, soup.
You assume it's metaphorical. Probably.
Higher up, the paving gives way to packed earth and root-knotted trails. The scent of cedar and crushed mint fills the air. Occasionally, you spot a prayer flag tied to a tree or a tiny shrine built into a hollow. You pause at one to leave an offering, a coin, a flower, and a piece of candied yam. The duck contributes a feather. He has more where that came from. Historians still argue whether such mountainside monasteries were truly part of the postal system or simply refuges for overburdened couriers in need of tea and existential advice. Some ancient records reference message monks who copied, decoded, or interpreted delicate scrolls too cryptic for secular scribes.
Others suggest couriers just like the view.
Eventually, the monastery reveals itself.
Not grand. Not towering. But serene.
A set of tiered buildings built into the slope like thoughtful shelves, each one painted with fading red and gold trim, each window open to the breeze. You're greeted by a man in a robe so simple it makes your courier tunic feel indulgent.
He bows. We saw your duck. Of course they did. He leads you to a small chamber lined with scroll cubbies and meditation mats.
You present your delivery, the silver-sealed reply from the court scribe. The monk bows again, hands pressed together, and places it gently in a jade-inlaid box.
The abbot will read it under the moon.
You're offered tea steeped in silence and a rice dumpling that tastes faintly of honey and garlic, which shouldn't work, but somehow does. While the monks consult one another about the incoming scroll, you're led to a side garden where moss covers everything like a quiet blessing. The duck immediately settles in the raked gravel, possibly violating a dozen unspoken rules, but no one stops him. You sit beneath a plum tree and let your body rest. It's not sleep, exactly, but a stillness that's almost better.
Your thoughts slow. Your muscles forget their complaints.
Your satchel, heavy as it is, begins to feel like part of you now, a shell, a shield, a story. When the monk returns, he hands you a scroll, not sealed, not marked urgent, but wrapped in lavender silk. From the abbot, he says.
It's a riddle. You nod. Any advice on solving it? He smiles. Riddles don't ask to be solved. Only carried. Fair enough.
As you prepare to leave, the monks line the path.
Not to bless you, not to recite anything.
Just to stand and watch, their faces calm as slate.
The duck bows once more. You bow, too. The way down is quieter.
The wind follows you, teasing your cloak, whispering through the cedar branches. At one bend in the trail, a fox watches you pass.
It doesn't run.
It just watches.
Back on the lower road, you meet an elderly couple leading a goat draped in bells.
The man tips his hat.
Courier? You nod.
May your path be steady, the woman says.
The goat sneezes. You choose to take it as a blessing.
Evening begins to fold itself around the edges of the valley. Long shadows, golden light, that gentle hush before lamps are lit and meals are served. You find a quiet place beneath an overhanging ledge and make camp.
Not grand.
Just a mat, a flask of lukewarm broth, and your companion curled nearby, feathers puffed against the evening chill.
You unwrap the lavender scroll. No riddle appears. Just one line, in delicate brushwork: some messages are not meant to arrive, only to be carried. You lie back, the stars peeking out overhead, the duck already dozing beside you. Another day waits on the other side of sleep. But for now, the road is still. The ink holds. The story continues. Dawn trickles in slow and golden, like tea poured from a careful hand. The ledge above you blows softly in the first light. Birds chirp nearby, but even they sound a little reluctant to wake the day fully. You sit up, stretch, and find the duck already standing at the edge of the camp, watching the horizon like a soldier on sleepy sentry duty. Today's destination is a village known more in rumor than in Naples, L'ancienne. A few scrolls have mentioned it in passing, always with a note of hesitation, as if the village itself shifts from place to place. Some say it's nestled beneath cliffs carved like giant sleeping faces. Others claim it moves with the fog, anchored only by the will of its oldest resident, a blind woman named Nua who speaks entirely in riddles. You aren't sure what to believe. But you do have a scroll marked for delivery there, wrapped in yellow silk, sealed with wax in the shape of a cloud. The only instruction: hand to Nua. No substitutions. No clarifications. Naturally. You head north through a meadow so full of dew it feels like stepping across a giant cup of cold tea. Your boots squish faintly with each step, but the scent of mint and wet grass makes the sogginess bearable. A squirrel follows you briefly, then thinks better of it when the duck glares back. The path narrows again, flanked now by cliffs carved with what look like sleeping faces. So that part was true, apparently. They stare in silence, moss-coating their brows like age and weather agreed on a shared aesthetic. Eventually, you reach a clearing where mist clings stubbornly to the ground, unwilling to rise. A bell chimes softly in the distance, though you see no bell. You follow the sound. There it is, L'ancienne. Not quite a village, not quite a dream. A few thatched homes curl around a stone circle, with wind chimes strung between trees and small offerings placed on flat stones: feathers, coins, knots of colored thread, slices of ginger. You step carefully into the square. A young boy with a painted face points toward the largest house. She's expecting you. The duck quacks in reply. No one seems startled. Inside, the room is dim, lit only by slits in the thatched roof and the slow dance of smoke from a tiny censer. Seated in the center is Nua. Her eyes are closed, her hair long and silver, her fingers wrapped around a cup of something steaming. You took your time, she says, not unkindly. You bow, then offer the scroll. She does not reach for it. Speak the first word on the seal. You blink. It's just a cloud. No, she says. The first word. Not the written one. You think for a long moment. Finally, you say, patience. She nods. Correct. You hand her the scroll. She accepts it without touching the seal, placing it beside her gently, as though it might wake. Some scrolls are written for the hands that carry them, not the eyes that read them. You don't ask for clarification. Outside, the duck wanders among the chimes, occasionally tapping one with his beak like he's tuning a harp only he can hear. You sit beneath a fig tree and share a slice of rice cake with a goat that appears from nowhere. Historians still argue whether places like L'ancienne ever truly existed, or whether they were embellishments created by poetic couriers to impress their grandchildren. There are no official records of the village. But plenty of scrolls mention its name with respect and caution. When you return to the house, Nua is already gone. In her place, a small pouch of dried chrysanthemum and a note: for the next time your thoughts wander too far. You add it to your satchel, beside the scribbled haiku, the ginger candy,
and the feathered talisman you nearly forgot. You leave Lancian the way you arrived, quietly, without ceremony.
The path behind you already looks different.
You walk slowly, one step at a time, the weight of messages behind you and ahead of you.
The duck waddles beside you, utterly at peace.
Somewhere behind, a bell tolls softly. The clouds begin to shift, light breaking through in brushstrokes across the fields.
You don't rush. You breathe. You continue.
Word count 1072. Wind down begins below the road, fades into softness now. The fields blur gently, like old ink on damp parchment. The last sunlight of the day lingers on the edge of the sky, bathing the world in hues of rose and bronze.
Each step feels less like movement and more like memory.
The duck walks closer to your side now, quiet, content, feathered body warm against your boot. You've walked many miles, carried many scrolls, heard riddles and run from boars and rescued stolen combs from shrine-top ducks. You've delivered messages not meant to be opened, and received wisdom not meant to be understood all at once.
You are tired, but not weary. Somewhere in the distance, a temple bell tolls again. Maybe it's the same one. Maybe it's a different village altogether. But the sound is steady. Gentle. Reassuring.
The trail curves into a grove of plum trees, their branches whispering overhead like lullabies in a forgotten language. You settle down beneath one, letting the satchel slip from your shoulder.
You loosen your boots. You breathe in the scent of dusk.
The duck curls beside you, eyes already half closed. You run a finger along the side of the pouch, feeling the soft ridges of scrolls still unread, still unspoiled.
Some messages, like dreams, aren't for reading. Only for carrying. And for now, the only message that matters is this: you are here. You've walked far. You may rest. Let the road sleep for a while. You will pick it up again in the morning. Sweet dreams.